Welcome to my tutorial for Over Horizon for the NES. I believe this was only released in Europe, but it's actually a very good shooter by Takara. And I will actually have a review up of the game pretty soon as well, so check that out if you're interested. But I'll go over some of my thoughts on the game, during the tutorial, especially the first few stages. There's not a hell of a lot to say. It's pretty damn simple. I didn't even refine the gameplay because this is really just commentary, over my playthrough. But what I did was, after beating the game, I redid the final stage using save states on the various sections to try to refine them and kind of demonstrate what a good run would look like. Since the tutorial is more for demonstration purposes to show some strategies. So the final stage is the hardest, so I decided I would try to refine that. So I spent a little extra time to refine those sections with save states and show, what I'd consider to be the optimal strategies for beating it. At least in my 2 hours and 40 minutes with the game, which is what it took for me to beat. Now you can see here you can edit the position of your little protective orbiting bits, and then you can test it all out, including your weapon loadouts in test mode. The way I set up my my pods, if you want to call them that, is I put one on front and one behind me. And that's my default position. The reason I set it like that is because it seems to offer the most protection, overall for moving through areas. Since you have, rear and front protection, and you can also shoot behind you and in front of you. So pressing B will shoot from, I believe, the left pod, and A will fire from the right pod. Now, if you have them set up in a different way, it may fire differently. I'm not sure. I always use that setup. I also set my weapons in the beginning to have, I believe, I had like 3 homing and 2 laser on my setting, something like that for the weapons. I set each one the same. And what that does is it sets up each weapon. There's H weapon, L weapon, and B weapon, I believe. Homing, laser, and bomb. And you can set the attributes of each one in that weapon editing menu. And I basically set them, each one of them, the same way like that. But then when I got to the last stage, I changed it. And I knocked the homing down to, I believe, 2 for each weapon. And then the other 3 units I put towards laser. What laser does is laser increases the power of your weapons. So if you even though it's confusing because there's a weapon called laser as well, but if you increase the laser attribute, that's going to increase the power of your weapons as far as I understand. Increasing bomb increases the explosion radius of your weapons when they hit enemies, which I didn't use at all. And homing is going to be how much of a homing effect your weapons have. So if you set it really high, your weapons will really home in on targets. But I find that the weapons home in plenty good with just like a 2 setting on homing, and then I ended up setting my laser to 3. Now I didn't do that in the early game because I didn't really understand how all that worked until later, but I believe that's how it all works. It's probably still a little confusing, but I recommend playing around with that if you're having issues. The laser weapon also seems to be the most powerful weapon, so if you set the laser weapon to 2 homing and 3 laser, you get a pretty powerful effect out of that, it seems. So I'm not using that here. I didn't know to set it that way. But I ended up doing better with that setting in the final stage. That's when I finally started to fuck around a little bit more. But that said, the first few stages you're going to see are not going to be refined at all. Because I beat them very quickly. Most of the time I beat them on the first time I tried them, I believe. So there was no refinement. I just reacted to whatever I saw. So this first boss is very, very easy. Like I said, I beat this the first time I got to it. I don't think I even died. But there is some slowdown, which makes it even easier. Basically, just try to stay out of the way of the snake and get up real close to the boss and just point blank it. The closer you are to the enemy, the more damage you seem to do with a lot of these games. So you want to try to get your nose right on the enemy and just pump shots into it. You should also be using the laser, so make sure you picked up the L. It's probably going to do more damage than the homing weapon or the bombs. I think the laser is the most powerful. That's what I read anyway. And it definitely damages the enemies faster than when I used the homing when I was fighting the final stage, the last boss. So yeah, very easy if you stay close to it like that and just, try to stay out of the way of the snake. Not much to really say there. The game does have unlimited continues, and whenever you lose a life, you start right where you died. But if you lose all of your lives, then you go back out to the beginning of the stage when you continue. Keep in mind that you can edit your weapons anytime you lose a continue, which, you're not really losing a continue, but, you're going back out to the title screen. So every time that you waste all your lives in a continue and go out to the title screen, you can go to the weapon editor, and you can edit your pods and weapons, and it won't affect the current stage that you're on, unless you shut the game off. I also wouldn't reset the system. I don't know what that would do, but if you don't shut the game off, you'll be able to continue on the last stage you got to, even if you want to edit your weapons. So you are able to change that without any consequences, which is really good. So that's why I was able to change my weapon power and homing ability on the final stage. Now, I don't show the changes I made, but I will explain them again when the final stage comes up. Again, this second stage was still very easy, so I didn't have to refine my gameplay or really, there wasn't much that I had to do aside from just, play the game. I think it's going to be pretty straightforward for most players. These gates seem to pretty much open at a certain time. I don't know if they're affected by shooting them. The little walls that appear, the walls of turrets, are very easy to take out. You just get up close to them and pummel them. Here I was using homing. At this point, I didn't realize that the laser was more powerful than the homing, so I didn't really know what weapon to use. I probably would have done even better using the lasers to kill shit even faster. So I would recommend probably just sticking to laser with 3 laser power and 2 homing in the weapon edit. And just using lasers. I think that would probably kill shit the fastest, and it would be enough homing power to home in on most of the targets. I wouldn't bother with the bomb attribute. I wouldn't waste any points on bomb. I think it just gives you a little bit of an explosive radius. But I'd rather go with power. I don't think you really need it for anything. So the best way to deal with those missiles is to have the pods set up in the menu as I show here, one to the front, one to the back of your ship, and to alternate fire. So fire, alternate rapidly, fire right, fire left, fire right, fire left, fire right, fire left, and alternate that rapidly, and you'll take out those bombs as they appear, in front and behind you. It's an easy way to deal with that kind of thing. I do that more on the final stage with some tricky sections, but it works pretty well. As long as you have, a decent shot. I mean, lasers would have been fine, but I had the homing here for most of the game. But you'll see me switch over to lasers for the final stage, which is what I should have, done for the entire game, but I didn't know any better. But yeah, it was only the last few stages that gave me any kind of trouble. And those could be a little challenging. I had to practice those. I believe there was a 1-up up to the upper left that I missed. If I would have taken the top path, I could have grabbed that. The 1-up appears as a very small ship. It's a small looking version of your ship. So if you see that, grab it. This was another boss I beat on the first try with no deaths. See, it shows your lives if you pause the game. I made a save state just in case I died on the boss. When playing on an emulator, I always recommend making a save state when you get to a new boss fight. Because then that way if you die, you can practice it as much as you need so that when you get back there next time, you will succeed and have it down. So that's just something that you see me do a lot. You'll see me save states frequently. I also do that in games with unlimited continues as a safeguard. Now, I do have a battery backup, which if the power goes out, will keep the game running, but only for a certain amount of time. But, sometimes things do fail. A game can crash. Another issue that happens when I'm recording is sometimes I lose my recorded footage of the stage I just beat. So sometimes reloading a save state will allow me to redo a stage that I already beat to get the footage. And whenever I do that, I always explain that in my playthroughs. But I luckily didn't have to do that in this playthrough. And I don't have to do that too often, but it does happen. But I do make save states frequently for a few reasons. But I never use them to cheat or to get back to an area, without actually getting back there. Unless, of course, I'm replaying something I just beat and I lost the recording, then I may do that if the game already has unlimited continues anyway. Now this stage is kind of unique in that you have to shoot the blocks to push them, and you kind of want to alternate between blocks. It can be a little tricky. Sometimes you can get crushed if you're not careful. But it's pretty easy to learn. Like I said, this was, I believe I may have beaten this stage. I may have used one continue on this stage and had to restart it. I think I messed up once, as far as the continue, but overall it was pretty damn easy. You can also push the blocks into the turrets to destroy them, because those turret things will push the blocks at you, which can be a little bit irritating if you don't kill them. But with the blocks, it's mostly about, for most of them, it's about pushing one block, then moving up and pushing the next block, then moving back down, pushing the next block. It's kind of like a zigzag kind of movement. First you push the upper block, then you push the lower one, then upper, lower. That usually gets you through most of these areas. But if you don't know what to do, you probably learn it pretty quickly after you use a continue or die. Luckily you have unlimited continues, so it shouldn't be too hard to learn. Here's a free life, but don't grab it immediately because they try to lure you out to grab that free life, and I got killed that way last time because, I tried to grab the free life immediately. Power-ups don't disappear in this game, so you have all the time that you need to grab them, as long as they don't scroll off screen, obviously, but you don't have to worry about the power-ups disappearing, so don't be in a rush to grab them. And always wait for the letter that you want. So I'm going with homing here, but like I said, I recommend going with lasers. It's just going to be better, I think. So the way you power up your weapon is you just grab the same letter again. So if you want my recommendation of lasers, then you would grab an L to get laser. And then you just wait for it to turn into L again and just keep grabbing L. I think you can do that 3 or 4 times maximum before your weapon is maxed out. You'll notice because the weapon shot gets really large and then it doesn't get bigger anymore. So I would assume by that point that you're not getting any more power from grabbing them. And then it's better just to avoid them because you don't want to accidentally grab the wrong weapon or grab the same weapon you already have when you don't need the power up, because it's always dangerous to try to grab shit. Because, you're going to be paying attention to the letters turning and try to get the letter, and then you're going to probably get killed by something else. So once you're fully powered up, just, leave those alone, but definitely grab the 1-ups or the pods. You always want that. Unless you have 2 pods, obviously, then you don't need to grab any more pods. The pod is also a power-up that you grab. And it's best to have both pods whenever possible. Otherwise, if you die, you're going to be back down to your base shot you see me with here. And I always use a rapid fire controller, and I set both buttons to rapid fire. But with the pods, I have rear and forward fire, so I can protect both sides. And I have a shield on both sides. The pod will absorb damage, so it's very useful to have that set up. This boss was very easy. I believe I beat this boss. Yeah, I did. I beat this boss the first time I got to it. It's extremely easy. I may have died once on it, but for the most part, it's very easy. All you have to do is shoot out the ice in the front and back of it. Or, you could shoot out the ice in just one side if you wanted to, but I don't see why you wouldn't shoot out both sides. But once you do that, you have a clear shot at the core. So that's all you need to do is damage that. And when it gets too close to you, just move up and around very quickly so that the spears can't strike you. And that's it pretty much. It's very easy. All the bosses can take a lot of hits, especially if you have just the basic little pea shooter here, And the boss does get a little faster towards the end of its life. So here I kind of suicided it a little bit. But very easy overall. All you have to do, like I said, is when it gets close to one side of the screen, you just move to the other side of the screen. Just go around it. And just repeat that back and forth until it's dead. The final boss can be quite difficult, and the final stage, but I'm going to make the final stage a joke with some of the exploits I'm going to show. It really trivializes the entire stage. It's a very long stage, but it's very, very fucking easy with what I'm going to show you. So I found some very, very good things, including a way to farm 1-ups. So there would be no reason to get stuck on the final stage. I didn't see any of this covered in previous videos. This was all shit I just figured out. I use save states to practice bosses and things like that. So, and I always recommend doing that. And by doing that, I can find, a lot of crazy safe spots and exploits for bosses, because I have a good idea of what to look for, because a lot of that kind of shit does work in other games. And some games are tested better than others when it comes to finding safe spots. But this game has a lot of loose ends when it comes to finding safe spots and exploits. You can pull a lot of bullshit on some of the harder parts. So this stage is long, but it has a ton of slowdown. So it definitely can be pretty challenging, but it's not really that hard, I didn't think. But the other stages do get a little harder. Some of them are pretty tough initially. But if you practice them in segments with save and load states, you can really, break them down section by section, and then when you play the full stage, you can put everything together pretty easily. And like I said, players that are familiar with these kind of shooters will not have too much trouble with this game, I don't think. It's a good game for beginners to intermediates when it comes to shooters. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was enjoyable. I'm not always looking for a brutal challenge on every game I play. I go through between 25 to 60 games a month usually. So a lot of those are very easy, low-hanging fruit type of games. And a good number of them are moderate difficulty. And sometimes there's a few extreme ones in there as well. Extreme modes and games. But I like a variety of different types of games and different challenge levels, including super easy games. I enjoy beating those as well. But this game, it's kind of moderate. But for an NES game, it's on the easier side for an NES game. I mean, most NES games will take me longer than 2 hours and 40 minutes to beat. So I didn't find this to be too difficult. But yeah, as long as you're paying attention here, there's so much fucking slowdown. And if you have the front pod and the back pod, plus I would recommend having a laser instead of the homing weapons I was using. But I was obsessed with the homing weapon. I thought that was the way to go. I didn't really realize that the lasers had, pretty much just as good of a homing capability. Maybe not quite as good, but it's enough. When you set your homing to like 2 or 3, the lasers have a very good homing, so it's not really an issue. You want to prioritize these bouncing guys that bounce on the top and the bottom of the screen. When you see them, take them out first. Initially, that's what killed me, and I died at that part of the level when that bouncing guy first appeared, so I wasn't expecting it, I guess. But, as long as when you see them, you take them out immediately, they probably won't cause you too much trouble, but they can be a pain in the ass. But try to stay mostly in the center and just try to dodge. There's so much slowdown, like I said. With the laser guys, it's moving so slow. As long as you're looking at what's going on, you can move either up or down to avoid the lasers or just take them out. When you get a chance to take out all the turrets, it makes things easier, obviously. But it's really, those stages not really too difficult because there's just so much slowdown. It's really beyond what this game could really handle. They tried to throw too much shit on screen. So this boss, I ended up playing it pretty sloppily, but it's actually pretty easy. This is my first time I got to it and I beat it. But mostly, you just move up and down with it and shoot it in the center where the weak spot is. And you just pay attention to where the lasers are materializing and you just move either up or down to avoid them. It gives you a moment to react. The lasers show where they're going to shoot from. So it's very, very telegraphed. It can be a little tricky to get your positioning right as the ship is moving, but, there was really no need for me to die this many times. I played it real sloppy, but, I did barely beat it, but it was good enough. But I mean, this easy to, it's easy to look at this boss when watching the video and see what to do, see what I could have done much better. It doesn't require too much explanation. So next up, I believe might be the water stage, which is one of the harder stages, and it's pretty lengthy as well. Yeah, and here the reason I'm showing the game overs in this edit is because I wanted to show which stages I got game overs on. And I don't know if I got a game over on the previous stage. I think I did once. I may have shown that. I wasn't really paying attention. But here you can grab your first pod and get down in the water immediately, and it makes this part very easy. Shoot this crab immediately as well, and if you get your positioning right, those bullets won't even hit you. The reason you want to get down in that water immediately is because those laser guys that are in the bubbles are very, very irritating to fight head on. So same thing here, but don't crash into the wall like I did, but stay low and just go under all those bubbles. You might even be able to go above them, but it's kind of tight up there, so I don't know if that'll work. But go below them if you can. And it'll make it much easier, because if you fight the bubbles head on, they take a lot of hits and they shoot a ton of lasers. It's kind of hard to get through all that shit. Now the waterfalls will push you down, so you do have to fight against them. That's the hardest part of the stage. It can push you into walls. It's kind of irritating. But you can see with positioning, you can avoid most of the enemies by staying low. And taking out these crabs as quickly as possible to get them off screen. And then just grab your power-ups. Try to get the laser. So for this is a mid-boss. So for this guy, the upper right corner is a semi-safe spot. It's a safe spot from his body, I found. If you stay in the upper right corner, his body can never kill you. But the projectiles that fall down can't be destroyed, and they can easily kill you. So you only want to use that safe spot when he's moving up in the upper right corner, like see in the beginning. It allows you to get behind him a little bit faster and avoid his initial spread shots. So I recommend starting off the fight like that, in that upper right corner. And then just try to get your laser shots in on him. And just be mindful of all the debris, the projectiles. Try to get in between the gaps. It's hard to get in that upper right corner again because, all that shit spraying out. So you're probably going to have to dodge at least one wave of these spit projectiles that he does, which are not too hard to dodge. There's wide gaps between them. They do fire pretty fast, but you'll get used to them. Practice this boss with save and load states if you want to be sure that you got it down. As with, any difficult sections or questionable sections. And that's it. It's really not too hard. But this stage, the first part of the stage can be tough if you don't have your positioning down with dodging those, staying low and avoiding those laser bubbles. So that can be tough with the water pushing you down. And then, you still have to fight a mini-boss that's a little challenging. And then there's, half a stage still left. So it's one of the more challenging stages that have shown up so far. But it's not too bad if you practice it in sections. But yeah, the rest of the stage is actually easier than the first half, as far as I, for me anyway. I mean, I beat the second half the first time I got to it, but the first half took me a while. I did lose some continues on this stage. All in the first half. But once I got past the first half, I beat the second half the first time. So I found it very easy, as long as you play carefully. The boss is also extremely easy. Now, it might be hard if you had the base gun without any power-ups. But as long as you bring the laser to it like this, and you have the front and back pods, it should be a joke to beat. I, was able to beat that the first time, so, I don't even think I died. But you can see how irritating these bubbles can be when you're in a confined space, so if you can, try to take them out in this area, because it's hard to get in that water and get below them initially while they're firing at you, because there's such a tight space to move through. So I say just try to take him out in that instance. Now see, this is the laser fully powered up. This is when the shots get really big. And that's going to do the most damage. You can see my ship is disappearing a lot in the recording. I think that has something to do with the game being a PAL game. The frame rate is probably different. The AverMedia, I think, records at 60 frames a second. The PAL might be like 30 frames. So I think there's a conflict there. So the ship does disappear a lot, but when I'm playing, it doesn't. It doesn't show up that way when I was playing. But you get the idea. You have a general idea of where my ship is. So shouldn't be a problem. So with this boss, I just stayed close to it and moved up and down as it moved, similar to the previous boss, but much easier. And I just stayed really close and kept firing my lasers, and that would take out the missiles. And, I also would be mindful of the turrets below and above me. I try to take them out as well. The homing kind of takes care of that since they're so close to you. The lasers just kind of home in on them and take them out. So that was it. Very, very easy. So I have no other real strategies for that. Next up, I believe might be the final stage, but I'm not sure. I think it is. Yeah, next up is the final stage, I'm pretty sure. So this is the hardest stage in the game. You can see I game over here quite a bit, but I only show, one game over screen. Now, I also edited my loadout for this stage. And the only thing I changed was I kept the pods in the front and back positions, default positions. But the only thing I changed... Also, if you hold down B and A, you can make your pods rotate as a spinning shield. And I think there's a way to set them to a secondary position by pressing some buttons. I never did that the entire game, either one of those tricks. So I know that's part of the controls, but I just didn't look up the controls before playing. So I didn't know about that. But you may want to experiment with that, but I didn't find it to be needed. But I did edit my weapon power and homing. So the way I set it up for this, and I like I said, I would have set it this way for the whole game, but I didn't know any better. But what I did was I set all my weapons to have a property of 2 homing, and I set the laser property to 3 on each weapon. So 2 homing was more than enough to home in on the enemies. It's not super strong homing ability, but it's enough, especially with the lasers and the homing weapon. It was plenty. So that really allowed me to maximize my power. And if I wanted more power, I could have experimented with maybe just 1 homing and 4 laser. Because remember, increasing laser attribute gives you more power to your weapons, more damage. And the homing is how much it's going to home in. So I probably could have experimented with that even more and got the power up. But see, for this boss, I had to make sure that I had enough homing because this was the main boss where I needed that. And I may have not needed the homing to be that strong, but you'll see what I mean in a moment. This boss is a complete joke if you do this method that I found. All you do is get up in the upper left corner and just stay in the upper left corner. And, as long as your weapon has a little bit of a homing to it, it's gonna hit the boss. So you can wait here for a few minutes if you're playing on an NES, but if you're playing on an emulator, I recommend fast forwarding until the boss dies because it takes a long time. It's just a time-saving method. Since this isn't a speedrun or anything like that, I consider it legit because there's no risk to sitting in this corner. It's just a waste of my fucking time. So I do kind of have my own rules when it comes to beating games. There's certain things that I will consider legit and allow. So I do use certain features of emulators for sure. But I don't allow any kind of save state cheating or anything like that. But I use it heavily for practice of specific sections. That really has allowed me to, once I mastered that or got really good at it, it really allowed me to beat a lot of these games in rapid succession and be able to clear out a lot of games each month. So I'm going to show you some more tricks. See, that makes the mini-boss a complete joke. So there is no fight there. It's just a free kill. So aside from that, just take out everything fast, and get in those spots. Get in that middle platform when this section begins, obviously. You saw me do that. Just follow what I did there. Now here's where you can really pull some bullshit. This area can be a little tricky. Make sure you get your max laser power up here. So collect those L's and max it out. But if you missed them, don't worry, because there's a trick here to get maximum weapon power and farm 1-ups. So if you grab the wrong power-up or whatever, don't worry about it. And now I'm going to show that a little bit later, but now for these waves of front and back approaching enemies, alternate your fire between front and back. So BA, 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 real fast. Just alternate quickly. And you should be able to take out all these guys without even knowing what side they're going to spawn on. That's what I did. I didn't even memorize their spawns or anything. So do that, and you should get through that very easily. So for these guys, just get real close to them, back up at first, and let them go up to you. And just try to point blank them as much as possible and take them out. Otherwise, when they fire their homing shot, you want to move forward just a little bit when they fire the shot, and it'll go around you. Now you see I grabbed the 1-up there. You're going to see me do that again. But see, for this final stage, I refined it and played it with save and load states. So I didn't show how in my real run, I posted up a real unedited run of the game. Well, I did edit out continues that were unsuccessful, obviously. But it's unedited as far as this final stage, is edited, and I use save states to show each section executed properly. So, for this part, take the bottom route. You're going to have to dodge this tentacle and just get in that bottom route instead of going to the top route. The top route is where you want to go when you're ready to go to the final boss. But if you want to assure that you beat the final boss, just keep taking the bottom route. See, this took us back to the previous location, which almost seems like a penalty, but it's not. This is your opportunity to either, if your weapon isn't maxed, then you can max it out. But more importantly, you can farm 1-ups, because this is a very easy section that it takes you back to. So just kill these guys again and grab the 1-ups. And you're going to get 1 free life, but you can come back here again and again. Now, I don't know what the maximum lives is, but you can probably get at least single digits. You can probably get at least 9, 10 lives maybe. If you can get 10 lives, you can probably get 99 lives. I'm not sure how far it goes, but I think I farmed it up to about 6 lives when I beat the game, just so I could have some lives to suicide on the boss and make sure that I would win. If I wanted to be really cheap and really make sure, I could have gotten 9 or 10 lives. If you do that, you're pretty much going to be guaranteed to beat it. So you can see why this level, as hard and long as it is, it's actually kind of a joke, because you can farm lives and you can pull bullshit on the mini boss to make it a complete joke where there's no fight. Just stay up in the upper left corner and so even if you're not good at this stage, as long as you can get to that, halfway through the stage, you can get to the point where you can farm lives. So you don't even need to be that good, as long as you can get to that point of the stage. And you shouldn't have trouble, because the mini boss, like I said, is not going to kill you. So just dodge those tentacles, but try to take out these plants as quick as possible, and move a little bit to the left or right to adjust your movement to stay in between the gaps of the bullets that the plants shoot out. So for this part, stay mostly to the right edge of the screen, but not all the way to the right, because you want a little room. But stay mostly to the right edge of the screen and just take out these fucking sperms. And all you got to do is adjust your vertical position a little bit to stay in the gaps so you don't hit into those walls. But once you've taken out the little sperms, you have a gap just rush through. Now I'm going to show a few exploits for this final boss to make it further easy as well. Though I do recommend getting used to the projectiles it shoots. There's pretty much 3 different patterns it does with the projectiles. It's based on how closely grouped together they are, I believe. Or, maybe not. But it seems to do them in somewhat of an order. It does the shots kind of in an order, it seems. And you can tell, after it's done a few of the patterns, you can tell when it's going to do the pattern that's closely grouped together, which is the most dangerous one, because it's pretty much like a straight wall being fired at you. And that's the one that usually gets me. But you'll get used to it if you play for a while. You'll start to get used to when the patterns are going to come out with the projectiles. But if you're having trouble with that, you can stay all the way up in the upper left corner. And since your weapon has a slight homing capability, the boss will take constant damage. It's going to be slow damage, but you can stay in the upper left corner and you'll be completely safe from the projectiles. What you won't be completely safe from is, see that tentacles moving to the left side? Once you see the tentacles start moving to the left side, you do have to get out of that upper left corner. So be aware of that. I'm also going to show a suicide trick to pretty much bypass the entire first form, which would be great for speedrunners, I think. But it's not the most practical thing for normal playing. It's a little tricky to get that positioning right without dying. So it's only if you really want to master that. Because if you fuck up, you're going to lose your fully powered up weapon. So now, if you farmed up a bunch of lives, it's not a big deal. You could just suicide the boss with like 9 lives. You won't even need to learn any patterns at all. So you can use those techniques if you want. So for this part, it's best to move up and down constantly, so that when the projectiles expand into little walls, you're moving up and down already, and you can kind of adjust your position and get over or below them. If you stand still and try to wait for them, it can be tricky to dodge, especially because some of those walls move diagonally, so it can fuck you up. I got hit by the tentacle, I believe, and then I just suicided the boss. So I'm going to show how to suicide the boss from the beginning. A little bonus footage at the end here. So what you can do is immediately wait for these tentacles to clear out, dodge the first projectiles, wait for the tentacles to move, and then get in between that gap with the projectiles, and then get the front half of your ship inside the boss weakness. And then all the boss's projectiles are going to fire over you in that gap, and they won't hit you. So this will bypass the first form completely. And you can do this no matter what weapons you have. It'll just take longer with a base shot. But see, once it goes into the second form with those walls, you're going to die. So your alternative is to know how much damage the boss is going to take before it goes into its second form and just get out of there early. Or, you just wait and you get killed by the wall in the second form. And then you could just suicide the rest of your ships into the boss's head. I think if you're doing a speed run, that would be really useful, because that's probably the fastest way to kill the boss, is to just, bury your fucking face in there and, just fucking, get rid of the first form and take a death, and then just suicide the rest of your ships into the boss's weak spot like you saw me doing. Just keep repeating that. I think that might be... I haven't seen anybody do that for speed runs, so I just offered a little bit of extra strategy that a speedrunner might want to use. Or if you're just trying to pull bullshit, like I said, if you farm up enough lives, you're going to have no problem with that boss anyway. So keep those things in mind. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.